Hello, my friend. In today's episode, I'm speaking with Mark Fisher, and we are talking about one of the stickiest management topics when it comes to managing staff members in your gym. And the topic is how to hold people accountable, how to hold accountable your team for doing the most important tasks in your business. It's a hard thing to do, and we give you the models we use to do this the most effectively. So if you have a team that you're managing and you want to hold them accountable to doing the things they say they're going to do, this is a great episode for you. So let's dive in. Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business of Unicorns podcast. Today I'm here with Mr. Mark Fisher. Hello, sir.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Before we dive in, we should do a quick shout out and reminder to people that we're in the middle of registration for our Unicorn Society group, which only happens twice a year. You want to tell folks about it?
Yeah. So the Unicorn Society, I'm sure you know if you listen to this. I'll be brief. Is our coaching group. I think maybe the thing that I'll share today that I do think is two ways. I think this group is maybe a little bit different than some of the other ones, and I should say I think there's a lot of great options these days if you're looking for support. But number one, this is designed not to scale well, which is to say that if you want to do this, if you want to spend time with me and Keeler and Pete and Ben, you will be getting us. We have some amazing additional people from the MFF universe will swing in, like Wheels, Amanda Wheeler, who was our fitness director for a long time. Emily Strasfeld, admittedly, she's going to be on maternity leave because she's having a baby. So this is not one of the groups where you sign up for it and then you get a bunch of like sub coaches, and you also get one-on-one coaching. So again, with no judging the other ones, this is not a group where you get access to like an exclusive monthly group coaching call of 100 people, right? And that's not wrong, by the way. Frankly, there's I think some great ways that can be done, particularly if it's at a lower price point. So it's a little bit more of a premium product, and I think it compares very favorably, particularly for the price that you're paying compared to some of the other ways that you could go. I think the second thing I want to highlight that is a little bit different than a lot of the other coaching groups I'm familiar of is we will train your team. It's like that is a massive, massive thing. In fact, here, do you want to maybe tell them about experience you had recently coaching one of our members'
Oh, yeah.
teams?
Yeah, totally. So, so as a Unicorn Center member, you get up to 90 minutes of one-on-one time with us every single month. And you can use that for us to interact with your team. So in some cases, people just invite their, managers or leaders in the organization they're trying to develop to work with us as mentors. Or I just did an hour-long Zoom with a whole team during a team meeting last week. And we went over how to have difficult conversations with clients, and they all brought scenarios, and I helped them work through their difficult, challenging conversations with really tough clients. And it was super fun and super valuable. But, I think Mark's right that we really are here to make sure that you and your whole team are thriving.
Yes.
And so if we can be helpful as a continuing education source and mentor for you and your managers and everyone on your team, that's what we're here for. And I think that's unique.
Yeah, your ability to have freedom as a gym owner is directly correlated with the skill and the ability of your team to really perform at a high level. And because you're never in property or land, I would just say that certainly in Mark Fisher Fitness, we found a lot of value in bringing outside people to help facilitate the development of our team. And if you find us credible and you are interested in us training you, then there might also be valuable. It might also be valuable for you to consider the impact on your business if we train your team. So we are also engaged in their development.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So if you're interested in learning more, my friends, go to businessofunicorns.com, click on Unicorn Society, read the page, see if we're a great fit, and then click apply. The application is just a way for us to get to know each other. The first step will be a phone call. Not asking for your credit card. We're just going to have a conversation about whether or not we're the right fit. And our registration this round ends Sunday, July 2nd. So don't hesitate. Go check it out. Which brings us to today's topic. Today's topic was submitted by Blake Denny, Unicorn Society member, gym owner, and he wanted us to talk a little bit about team accountability. What are some of our favorite, most effective do's and don'ts when it comes to holding our team accountable to doing what they say they're going to do? And maybe I'll just kick this topic off with not a tip, but just a normalizing of like, this is hard. This is hard. This is one of the topics I think we talk with Unicorn Society members about the most. That we seem to be very good and many times very patient about when our clients don't always do what they say they're going to do. We're good at coaxing them and coaching them. And when it comes to our team, it's just a different beast. It's a kind of a different animal to have to hire people for a job and then have them not perform in a way that you want, to have them just not do the things that they say they're going to do. And so I just want to acknowledge that this is a tough thing to do. It's a skill you can develop, my friends. So if you're a new manager, a new leader out there, and this is new to you, holding people accountable as a leader, you can get better at this. You can get better at this. I know, Fisher, is something we both write about and talk about a ton. So maybe you want to kick us off with a few initial thoughts about how to do this well.
Yeah, gosh, it's hard to cover this without spending days because there's so many things to unpack here. But I think one
Yeah.
thing I'll offer is certainly, the first thing you're attempting to do, we're assuming if we're talking about accountability that there is a violation of the standard. Someone's not performing the way that you want. Either they're not doing it well enough or they're not doing it at all. And I think it's important to unpack, first of all, why this might be happening, right? Because I think even more foundational than the issue being they're not quote unquote accountable, which maybe implies that they just don't care that much. Or I think the first thing to understand, or at least to explore, is do they actually know what it is you want them to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because unfortunately, more times than we care to admit, that's where the issue starts. There's actually not clarity. Maybe there's not a written down SOP. Maybe they weren't properly trained in the first place. So there's not something that is clearly super well trained and articulated, a real vision and a model for whatever that is, whether it be expectations for what time to arrive on shift, or how many times to say a client's name in a session, or how to coach a deadlift. The foundational issue might just be there's not actually as much clarity as you think there is. And that's common because things are in your head. It's very difficult to get things out of your head and into other people's brains, and usually on paper or video or something that is external to you, right? So that's kind of the first thing I think to explore.
Yeah.
The
Can we
second,
pause there for a second
yeah,
before you go to number two? Just because I want to just underline this and highlight this. It's one of the most common reasons
yeah, it's
why
like,
this
oh,
happens,
yeah,
right? And we've been
yeah.
saying for years that part of your job as a manager and owner and leader is to make your implicit expectations explicit, to write down what it is you want from people in the form of SOPs or standard operating procedures, in the form of making videos. Because one of the things I hear all the time, and this is not a judgment, I just hear it so often, is, well, I can't get so and so to do X, Y, and Z. I was like, well, walk me through. How did they learn to do X, Y, and Z? We're like, well, I told them before. Okay, well, how many times did you tell them? Well, I told them once, just last week. Okay, that's not enough. That's not only can you just not tell them once, but they need to be trained repeatedly. They need a resource to go back to remind them how it goes. They need to be tested and quizzed, and there needs to be some ongoing quality control. And so, I think the expectation that I can tell someone once or twice is just, it's a false expectation. There's just, it's not how humans learn. And I think that's one of the things that I'll speak for myself was really challenging in my early management years. I had to disabuse myself of that assumption that if I just tell them I'm done, it just takes more work than that. But yeah, so I just want to plus one that with real enthusiasm. So you want to move on to number two?
Yeah, I guess, one thing too, it's probably worth highlighting before I move on to another two here, is part of the challenge, admittedly, is it's difficult to talk about this in a vacuum because the way you hold somebody
Mm,
accountable to show up on time versus accomplish a task that requires skill under high stress versus
mm,
do not steal money from the company, they're different. So you can't quite conflate them exactly, right? But admittedly, all of those, with maybe the exception of don't steal money from the company, I mean, there's probably some things that reasonable people can say, okay, I shouldn't have to write that down for you if you didn't know that. I'm comfortable saying like it's probably not the right fit for you. But the way you hold people accountable, depending on what it is going to be kind of different, right? So,
yeah.
but assuming we're talking about something that does require either some skill or even some attention to detail, right? And this is the other thing that's challenging, is everyone's different. Right? It's a hard thing to talk about in a vacuum because for some people, things that seem obvious to you and even to other people on your team, well, that individual, they might be just a lovely, wonderful person to be around. There's so many wonderful, warm, interpersonal skills. And they genuinely, for them, it's not as obvious or as easy to be as detail oriented as for you it is, right? So moving down, I think the next thing to understand is, okay, well, did they know how to do the thing, right? And again, there's limits here too, right? It's like, and when I was younger, I can remember, I read Extreme Ownership, and I was like, oh, if so and so's not here on time, it's because like, oh, I'm not a good enough leader. I need to really help them. And I've seen this, and this has been a source of real frustration, which now I nip in the bud. I don't really allow of other managers following that and getting, I think, like too empathetic and doing things. Oh, well, so and so's not showing up, so I'm going to help them. I'm going to text them every morning when I wake up what their schedule is, so they do. I was like, no, you're not going to do that, right? But again, that is very different than they sincerely don't know how to do the thing, right? Because it's one thing to like, I'm not doing the thing at all. And again, we're also, we've crossed off, they know what to do. So there's total clarity and they're not doing it. Sometimes it's because they don't know how to do it. So, okay, so if they're not, for instance, delivering on a standard operating procedure for your vision, for the optimal client experience in your training session, that's a little harder. That actually requires skill, that requires practice, that requires training. So if they don't know how to do it, then the solution there, it's not a matter of like being harder on them, right? Or like threatening with carrots and sticks. They just need more training, right? And sometimes you might not be great at it. Maybe you need external training. Again, this is going to be very different. If you have somebody working on maybe some projects on the business, if they're, doing something like social media posts and it's not great, but you're not great at it, you just know it's not good. Well, there, the answer is not, I'm going to keep escalating you and I'm going to fire you if it's not good again, assuming you've defined good, which, as we've discussed, is a nebulous concept. But ultimately, I think the next thing is, do they know how to do it, right? And I'll pull up there maybe if you have any reflections, because I think then the next step, then we do get into the more typical issues, which is, okay, they know how to do it. They know it's supposed to happen. They're still not doing it. Well, now what's going on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you're nailing it, right? I think obviously because we talk about this all the time, we're on the same page with this. Is that it starts with, are the expectations even clear? And then it moves into, okay, well, if they are, and we can establish that they are, because they can articulate back to us what the
Right.
expectation is, then it's usually a matter of they just didn't get enough training. They haven't gotten enough sets and reps in to get good at the thing you want them to be good at yet. So they keep making mistakes. And sometimes they're honest mistakes based on a lack of competency. And sometimes they're honest mistakes based on a lack of motivation. Right. So I think it's that,
Yeah.
that 2x2 matrix of, motivation and competency I think an interesting diagnostic tool. Right. So, I mean, for those of you who I don't want to glance over this, I think it actually is a useful thing to write down. Right. If you make a little 4x4, 2x2 grid, and on one side you have, high competency at the top, low competency at the bottom. And on the
Right.
bottom, you have, low motivation on the left, high motivation on the right. And you put, write your whole team in that box, put them in the quadrant you think they go in when it comes to motivation and competence. And I think for each, depending where they land in those four quadrants, you might want to treat them differently, right? There's some people who are unmotivated, but it's because something's going on at home. There's some people who are
Right.
unmotivated
Right.
because they don't like how much they're paid. There's some people who have low competence because they just don't want to get good at this thing that really matters to you. Sometimes they have low competence because they didn't get enough practice, right? There's so many factors. Right? But I think the
Yeah.
fact is you have to address clear expectations and then clear training. And I think for the
Right.
motivation piece, I think training can help with motivation. People like doing things they're good at. So I think motivation, can come with competency. But in some cases, motivation has to be a separate topic, a separate kind of approach. We have to kind of get to the root of what'll make you want to do this more.
Right.
Right? Do I need to incentivize you with pay? Do I need to give you different hours? Have you work with different
Mm-hmm.
people? Right? Do we need to collaborate on this SOP to make make a version of it that actually you want to do? Right? So there's lots of ways to tackle those, but I think we're on the same page. It starts with expectations, training, maybe some conversation about motivation. And then if that's still not working, you still can't make progress after they're well trained and hopefully a little motivated, then we move to kind of the disciplinary process, the kind
Yeah.
of the carrots and the sticks that really, that really matter. The only thing before we move on to those, I'm sure we can walk through, I think, how we think about that. The only thing that I'll say that people often get wrong when it comes to accountability and training people who are new at shit is people don't give, and I've been in this category. I know you'll probably say you have as well, Fisher. We have not always given our newest team members enough praise early on.
Hmm.
What we often do is we hire a new person and we're just, from day one, we're just giving them a lot of feedback, a lot of feedback, a lot of feedback, and one of the things that all the research says about adult learners is when you are new at something and you suck the most at it is when you need the most praise. Right?
Right.
You need to learn early on that you're heading in the right direction, that you got this. I can see you can do this. I see you're already making progress. I see how much you're trying. Right? They need to hear praise early on. And I know I've been really guilty of not giving that as much as I should. So, yeah. Anything you would add to that?
No, I think that's a good point.
Yeah. Maybe let's talk a little bit about, okay, well, when you have to get into carrots and sticks, what do you do? I know we've
Yeah.
used like the CPR process. What, you want to start with that? Start there.
Yeah, I guess so. I will say this. This part of the process I think was challenging for me for a long time because
Mm-hmm.
I am very much intrinsically motivated to do things. And there's reasons, and I'm not purely intrinsically motivated. I also have like an upside that other people don't because I run the business, right? I'm wired in ways that, some of my particular, wounds have facilitated certain professional skills and attributes that have served me. But everyone is different here, right? And I think really understanding the value of carrots and sticks is, I do think, a thing that we, if we're just realistic as humans, need to understand. I think, I would highlight something Keir said before, which is that the carrots in a perfect world can be somewhat individualized because also different people are just driven by different things, right? Some people are driven,
Mm-hmm.
some are by money, some by status, some by praise, some by impacts. It's usually some combination of a number of things. So when you're not seeing what you want, I think, all right, we know what it is. I know they know how to do it. They're not doing it. Are they properly incentivized? Is there enough incentive that there's something in it for them? Which again doesn't have to be just money. It can be like, I'm impacting clients in the way that I want. We're properly emphasizing the mission of the business. I feel connected with something bigger than me. So that is a reflection of my commitment to changing people's lives, that I'm going to do this thing that otherwise is not particularly of interest or feels administrative. But then at a certain point, I do think sticks do need to come out. And this is where people run issues. And I think we've spoken about this before on this podcast, but in brief, you don't want to get into accountability Groundhog Day conversation, right? Where I think, level one manager, God love you, God bless you. You're not even having a conversation. You're just getting silently mad until one day you freak out. So that's not great. So level two manager is, I'm mentioning it most of the times, but I'm not really escalating. And I'm so mad, I'm not really sharing that I'm like mad, but it's kind of obvious because I'm being sort of passive aggressive and everyone knows, but I'm not really differentiating these conversations. So the paradigm that we quite like, which we've taken from a book called Crucial Accountability, is we use the acronym CPR, which is to say that the first conversation is about the content, right? And I always say that first one, I think another way of thinking about it is it could be coded as the mention. It's not a big deal. I'm mentioning it. You're mentioning in passing. The second time you have to have a conversation about the same issue, now it's about the pattern. It's about, we've already talked about this before, but the behavior is not changing. And again, we have to be honest if we're also considering it from the spectrum. Is this a skill-based issue or just like a thing they're not doing right? Again, the example is they're not nailing the SOP at the level you want. You could tell they're trying, but in spite of all your attempted training, they're just not getting it, but they want to do it. Here's the challenging thing. You still kind of hold them accountable. That's obviously a different conversation. Like, we've already talked about you being late, but you're late again, not 2 weeks later. Again, you're late, and you getting here on time. That's not a skill-based issue. And at this point in my life, I'm not interested in having a conversation of helping you develop the skill of setting your alarm and get here. It's like, we're adults. I have a child. This is not a conversation I'm going to be particularly patient with. And then the third step, so we have content, then pattern, is the relationship. Right now, the stakes are higher, right? And that means this third conversation is not about just the thing. It's not even about the pattern of the thing. Now it's about the impact on a relationship, my ability to trust you, my desire to work with you, the impact you're having on your colleagues, the impact you're having on clients, the impact you're having on our mission. And again, if the first one is the mention, hey, no big deal, did you notice that thing you did? Okay, cool, we're good. Okay, everything's good with you. Okay, cool. Do you need coffee? The second one has to feel more formal, right? Let's go for a walk. Let's walk around the corner. Hey, can I talk to you for a second? Hey, I noticed this thing again. And it should feel heavier. Maybe sit down. But I would encourage, and this is hyper specific, break the pattern, take them somewhere else
Hmm.
so it feels heavier. And then the third one has got to have some heft. It's got to have some heft, right? This is, you write them an email in advance. You should be more formal. It's in an office. The door is closed. Maybe they sign paperwork because we're doing an official strike. We're capturing written documentation that these standards are getting violated. So if you haven't escalated, again, the reality is it's some, like, again, to the defense of your team, sometimes they just don't get it. And I'm particularly highlighting this because when we're talking about things like lateness, something like lateness, which is, I'm just keep using because it's an easy example.
Hmm.
The issue usually isn't even really that I just actually don't give that much of a shit. It's kind of that, but it's also they just, their values are different, right? Because often it's going to correlate with somebody that's just like also lovely to be around, and that is why you get stuck in this issue. Because let me name this issue that many of you have, and everyone has it, is what do I do about Jimmy? All the clients love him, and I love working with him, but he just always drops balls. How do I reconcile the fact that everybody loves this person and in some ways they're adding so much value, but Jimmy infuriates me, and the type A people on my team are just deep with resentful and anger at Jimmy because they don't understand, because Jimmy seems to float through life and all the clients love Jimmy. And the reality is Jimmy is helping grow the business because, man, clients love Jimmy. But at the same time, Jimmy keeps not doing the things that need to happen. And it's really starting to present an issue, right? And this is where I think this gets tough because there's not an algorithm for this. Because at a certain point, you have to get real with yourself. Like, are you going to fire Jimmy? And I'm not telling you one way, right, or the other, but I'm saying that it might be worth you getting real honest about what the thing is, because at a certain point, you are going to run out of sticks, right? And you're going to
Hmm.
have to make some subjective decisions about how much you weight this individual behavior or this individual facet of performance against these other ways this individual is contributing, right? So I don't have like a really good, it's like not math, right? That's like a subjective thing. And of course, you can't even begin to talk about this without the specific context of the contours of this individual, your culture, the relationship, et cetera. But I want to call that out here, not because I want you now to feel in a sea of chaos and unmoored to any framework, but just to like see you and say like, that's where this gets tough, right? And that's a thing that you read all these business books like, oh yeah, the framework sounds great, but I want to say like in the real world, this gets messy. It's not always algorithmic, but you can over time get better and better at this if you follow this framework. Just know that you might get to the end of the road and it's going to require some judgment on your part about how to proceed that no one else will be able to tell you what to do.
Yeah, totally. I want to say to our listeners, if you're getting the sense that Fisher and I might have had a few Jimmies to work with in our
Yeah,
life, you are
yeah.
you are correct. you are correct. Yeah, but
Love you,
I
Jimmy.
think it.
Love you, Jimmy.
Yeah, love you, Jimmies. Yeah, I mean
Love you,
it's
Jimmys.
true. It's it's
They're
true.
great.
We're all going to have folks who just have different ways of working than what we want. And that's going to go in all different directions. But I think your
Yes.
description of the CPR process was beautiful. I think I have nothing to add there. I will say this, that I think that the process of once you get to the P and the R, it should start to overlap with a kind of HR process that Mark mentioned of like, you should start documenting this shit if you haven't already. Right? It's got to be
Yeah.
written down, captured in email. And by the time you get to an R, ideally you're doing some version of a performance improvement plan, which,
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to go into great detail about that, but it's basically a written plan for how I need this person to improve if they're going to keep their job. And whether it's about lateness or any other kind of performance issue, it's got to be well documented. And, the reason for this is both clarity of what needs to change and also for legal reasons. If you do wind up needing to terminate this person, you have a written trail of conversations, evidence that this is not a surprise to them. And I think all of that really matters when going through this. And honestly, it's the right thing to do for them. Right? If they are consistently having to have conversations with you, if an underperforming employee is having conversations with you on an ongoing basis about how much they're dropping balls, it's not fun for them either. And so at some
Totally.
point, I think it's like the most humane thing to do is to say, listen,
Yeah.
we can't keep doing this. Let's make a plan and see if we can get aligned. We'll give it 3 months. And if we can't get on the same page about and find a version of your job performance that works for both of us, then we should just part amicably. Right. And that's exactly what a performance improvement plan is meant to do. And it's not fun. It's not exactly algorithmic, right? Because depending on what these other folks bring to the table, what this person brings to the table, it won't be the same for everyone. But there has to be some consistency. There has to be some consistency. And I think anytime, I'll speak for myself, anytime I felt like I've gone too long with not letting someone go who should have been let go sooner, I've regretted it. I've regretted it. It's the hardest thing to do is to fire someone, but I think I have more regrets about not firing people sooner than I do about the actual firing.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because I've thought about this a lot, right? Because I don't know of anyone who's ever in the history of the world said like, oh, I should have fired them later. I think I fired them a little too quickly. Because the only person that I think could really feel that and really do that is someone that's like maybe more on like the sociopathic side of the spectrum. And of course, once you've let the person go in your head, you've committed to that. The reality is going to meld to your conception that this was the right thing to do, right? But in practice, I think it is true. I think probably in a vacuum, small business owners probably should make this move quicker. And I'll say this, another benefit of CPR, another benefit of being very diligent. And, this is the other thing too, I want to mention about this that makes this whole conversation challenging for a lot of you as owners and operators is if you are not very organized, if you are not dialed in and just relentless and so consistent with this, you will thwart the whole process, right? And then you'll have the issue where you're letting the person go, but they feel like it's coming out of nowhere. And they're not entirely wrong because you were not consistent about this. And you're not wrong because the person has been doing kind of crappy work, but you weren't following the system, right? You weren't holding them accountable every time they violated standards. You were not using the CPR system. You were not documenting the things. Because the upside of this on the other side is if you do this well, then what's going to happen is a lot of times you're going to manage them out. Because like Keeler said, a lot of these people, they don't want to be in your business. Nobody wants to do a bad job, right? Nobody wants to be upsetting you. Like admittedly, there are people with like more of a tolerance of being comfortable with like, yeah, you're upset, but like, I don't care. I got here eventually. I was only 10 minutes late. It's kind of your problem, not mine. Right. So
no one wants to be constantly called into the boss's office. That's not fun for anybody.
No. And like, again, like at a certain point, your worst case scenario, of course, the person just thinks like, well, my boss is really uptight about this whole having to be here on time thing. But in practice, if your team member, which they almost all do, they want to do well, they want to please you, like, they'll know it, right? And they'll probably start looking for other options. So if you do this well, a positive outcome that's going to happen a lot of times is they're going to put a notice. At a certain point, you're not going to have to let them go because it's so clear to them they're not performing the way they want. They're afraid about where this is going. They want to save face, and they don't want to work with you anymore because they know they don't seem to be able to give you what you want.
Yeah. Well, I can literally name right now off the top of my head 3 times in the last month or so that's happened for a Unicorn Society member where they were managing really well, having escalating accountability conversations. And because of that, person got the hint, listen, this is not working. And they decided to leave before they had to get fired, which, you don't want to bank on it. But when you do that, that's actually a really good sign that you've managed them well.
Outcome.
Because it's a really good outcome that they're taking, the initiative to say, this is not working. Let me just remove myself, So I think that's awesome. I feel like there's so many more things I want to say, but I'm going to discipline myself to just stop here. Let's pull it up.
4 hours.
Let's pull it up. We will follow back up with this. Thanks again to Unicorn Society member Blake Denny for giving us this question. Obviously, we liked it because we talked for almost 30 minutes about it, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again soon. But thanks for a great conversation, Fisher. I mean, I think that just to give a quick 30-second recap, the things that really matter most are super clear expectations about what you do expect from people. Really good training to make sure they know how to do the damn thing. Really making sure you're honing in on both their competency and their motivation for that thing. And then having a good process in place for when they can't get it together. When you can't get the performance you want, you have an escalating process that moves them to either better performance or moves them lovingly out your door. Is that a good 30-second summary?
Yeah, great.
Yeah. Crush. All right, my friends. Well, if you love this episode, please leave us a 5-star review everywhere you listen. Email us, michael@businessofunicorns.com, mark@businessofunicorns.com. Let us know what do you want us to talk about, or if any questions about joining Unicorn Society, email us. We're here to talk. But enrollment's open until Sunday, July 2nd. So go read the page, and apply. And we hope to work with you soon. Have a good rest of your day, Fisher.
Bye.